Thank you so much for meeting with me today, and welcome to STS's Success Talk series. I'm Leah, the Peer Success Coaching Graduate Assistant here at Binghamton. I'm so glad that you're here to have this discussion with me. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. I'm Antonia. I go to the peer success coaching meetings. I'm a junior. I study neuroscience and health and wellness. And I also am the president of the Pappy Parker Players Improv Club.
Awesome. Thank you so much for introducing yourself. I'm really excited to show some resources and talk about things available to Binghamton students. So today's topic is going to be goal setting. What does this topic mean to you?
I feel like it means like two different things. The first thing being kind of like unpleasant and like heavy in terms of like, oh, like I don't really know like what like my goals are, or like I'll set goals and not really meet them. Like I feel like it is sometimes a little pricklier than we sort of hear, especially when you've set a lot of goals and have then like had trouble meeting them. So I think that what it means to me instead is more like getting closer to like being generally like a good place and content with what I'm up to and what I'm going to be up to.
I really like that. I think that that's a good kind of realistic looking at this as this is what goal setting is. So I like that definition.
Thanks.
So one of the first things that I want to talk about, and I know we've talked about this before in the weekly student success groups, is SMART goals.
Yeah. Cool. So do you want me to do the one that we teach in the groups or the one that I do separately from the groups? Should I not have said that?
No, this is good because I'll go over the acronym and then I'll have you explain yours. Because
awesome.
I really liked your perspective on
this. Because the way we teach it is good, and I tried it, and then I just also have a different one that I do sometimes, but they're both good.
Yes. Okay, perfect. So I will start out by explaining what SMART goals are. So SMART is an acronym that stands for specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and time-based. And so this is a way when you're setting goals to make sure that you're using a framework that really makes it a goal that you think that you can do, rather than something that's unachievable, kind of out there, and you're like, well, I said I was going to do it, but I don't know how to measure whether or not I did it. So do you want to share your acronym?
Yeah, so I really like the part of SMART goals that has to do with like the specific and measurable. I think that like breaking it up and getting specific is usually the way through like anxiety and feeling that sense of like being stuck. Most of the time when I've been stuck on like doing an assignment, it's just because I forgot to include like find the syllabus on the course website, which I knew would be buried there. So I just sort of like buried the lead. But the one that I use is specific, measurable, ambitious, realistic, and timely.
Okay. Do you want to explain the change to ambitious?
Sure. So the part that I have changed is instead of achievable, I have ambitious, and instead of relevant, I have realistic. And for me, the ambitious piece is basically what is when I imagine myself like completely knocking it out of the park, like how does this either like relate to my like ambitions in terms of like my career or like my day or like my image of myself if I can like do this really, really well. And it's basically just like giving myself that moment to kind of like cheerlead on like my like ambition and kind of get that like dopamine and like competitiveness like started about the thing. And then realistic is kind of like, all right, now that I'm all revved up, like let's put up a little bit of fences. Like now that I'm like, oh man, like if my room was clean, I could like have people over and decorate it and all this great stuff. Okay, normally I get about 20 minutes of cleaning done at a pop. So let's just start there and then continue sort of like reining it in. And I think that that's helpful because it brings you back to like what's specific that you already came up with and reminds you like the times when you've messed up, that gives you information about how to get closer to your goal now. And then like the timely piece at the end is just sort of like putting a period on it. Like by this point, it will either be done or I'll have new information about how to make it easier to be done in the future.
Thank you for sharing. I kind of love that. I might have to start teaching it your way.
Ooh, a little bit of a switch.
Yes, we'll have to see. But I think that this is a good kind of background info to go into talking about goals in specific. So some of the things that we like to teach around goal setting is that they help you to stay motivated and work towards something, but they also can be flexible and change. So do you have any experience with that or anything you'd like to share about that changing nature of goals?
Oh gosh, so much. Can you be a little more specific with your question? I don't want to go off on a billion-year-long tangent.
That's okay. We love tangents here. But,
Good.
So when we talk about goals as this entity that students want to set, we like to highlight that, they can change because the goal you set at the start of the semester might not be the goal you have at the end.
Yeah.
So just if you have any insight on that.
I think the biggest thing that has gotten in the way of me goal setting is I've set goals like for someone else in a sense, or I'll be like, my goal is to like ace this test or something like that. But in the back of my head, it's like, that isn't really my goal. My goal is to like not get like in trouble for having a bad grade. Like part of that is like having like a good grade, but like figuring out like what about the goal is actually bringing you closer to your like life worth living, to kind of like put a fine point on it. And then like if you feel, for me, when I haven't been getting to my like goal, just sort of trying to be more like gentle with myself about how much like judgment and shame that brings up, especially like when you set a goal that's important and you don't meet it and other people are sort of like aware or it impacts them, that can bring up like so much like shame and like judgment and guilt. And just thinking of it instead from the perspective of like, I'm continuing to learn about how to make myself do the things that I want to do. And like, maybe it took messing up this way because it gave me information about like why I couldn't get it done the way I thought I could get it done. So I think just not artificially racketing up the stakes. Like I've had days where I've been like, I'm going to like sit in my room until this is done. And even when that did work, it was way less fun. The work was way less good quality. And like, there is a time and a place where that is like needed. But I think doing it through like the SMART goal format, like if your goal is like, I have to get this paper done by tonight, like breaking it up into the specifics of like, I need like these like 5 pages and I need to spend an hour gathering like sources first. And I need to like read it over when I'm done. Like breaking it up, I think makes it seem less like I have one task and the way to do it is by willpower. Because then if you don't do it, you're like, the problem was with my willpower, when often there was a bunch of other stuff that had nothing to do with that got in the way.
I think that you just touched upon so many good things. So thank you for sharing. I think that breaking ththings down is huge. And figuring out what motivates you and how you can translate that into productivity is really essential to setting good goals. Because if you're setting goals and they're not really your goal, they're just goals that you wish were your goal, you're one step removed from how to actually feel motivated and productive.
Right. Because also, if you're setting goals that are, like you just said, like one step removed, any reward that you kind of give yourself isn't really going to like do its job, because like you're not rewarding the thing you just like spent all that time and energy on. So like for me, like when I'm studying for like a test, like now my goal isn't necessarily to like show that grade to other people, but instead to be like, I feel like I did like I feel like I learned or at least touched on most of the things that were covered in that test, so that when I see what I got wrong, it's like, oh yeah, okay, I can kind of see how I would get that wrong. And like going with that, like after I like am done studying, I'll like listen to like a song that makes me feel really good, or that like I liked when I was a kid, and like get that sort of sense of like dopamine flowing and like rewarding myself with that, rather than being like well, the goal will be met and then I'll get some reward, which is like the grade. Or like my room will be clean and then my reward will be like I have a clean room. Like if your goal is so hinged on like there needs to be a reward, it might be hard to like motivate yourself to do it. And that's why I really like the like ambitious part, because you can sort of like imagine a reward that's more in your control rather than like someone else saying something to you.
Yeah, and this is something you and I have actually talked about before, is when you do all that studying and you really stress yourself out and you're like, well, the end goal is getting through the test.
Yeah.
A lot of the times you get out of the test and you feel just as bad and anxious as you did before you went into it.
Mm-hmm.
And so switching that mindset and thinking about, well, how am I going to reward myself? Not for the grade, but for
like
doing
the effort.
Yeah.
Because like there's so many times I have met goals completely by accident, or like there's been a goal that I know someone else would set that I just sort of like stumble into. And the reverse, like there's some things that like are pretty easy for people to knock out that like take an enormous amount of effort for me. And so I think coming up with like rewarding yourself just for even setting a goal and like being able to like reflect on a goal, because it's like difficult to reflect on how well you did setting a goal, especially if you're like have like a history that involves like people kind of like being on you for like not being super like good with like the types of skills that we teach. Like I know for me that's like a really big thing. And so I think just trying to make the process as comfortable as possible, because like it's a learning process. Like you're not just going to be good at it. And like I often like forget to do this, but what I will say is like when I remember, it has a really positive impact on me.
Thank you for sharing that. I really love hearing your experience as well, and I think that that's going to be helpful for students who listen to this. So I'm going to shift the topic a little bit. We're going to go into resources.
Awesome.
So as a student at Binghamton University, what resources do you use? What's your strategy when it comes to goal setting?
So I think I have two different like big ones, well, three different ones. The first is if I'm being like set an assignment by someone, either by like a teacher or by like the supervisor at my lab, I'll try to go to that person. And if I can't get there like in person, I'll just try and send an email, like literally just rewording the expectation, being like, hey, like this is what I need by then, just to make sure that like my goal is appropriate, because I think that really cuts down on like, well, I don't even know what I'm supposed to be doing. I just know that it's a lot. And a lot of times like teachers are willing to kind of like listen while you brainstorm or help you to brainstorm. If you're like, I have this test to study for, they might be like, you don't need to look at the textbook. Like the specifics of your goal isn't touch every piece of information we've learned.
Yeah.
The specifics of your goal needs to be like review the slides, and like your measurable points are like how many slide decks you get through, or like how much time you spend if you want to do like content versus like time, which like it's personal preference. And then the second thing, if I'm not going to go to like someone setting me the goal, is I'll see if I can talk to either like someone that I live with or like a friend or like a parent, and just be like, I have like this thing that's on my plate. I really don't want your input on it. The most helpful thing you can do to help me get this done is just like kind of listen while I go like point by point of like the SMART goals and sort of like talk it out, just because I think the way it's organized, the order is really conducive to like figuring out what your goal is and what needs to happen to make it happen. And I think that's worked really well because I've been really specific of like, I know that you want to help me with this. Here is how I will most appreciate it. And then just remembering after it's done to loop that person back in again and being like, hey, like, thank you so much for your help with this. I did get it done. And just like giving them that little bit of like, oh, well, all I did was listen, but cool to get the kudos, I guess. And then the third thing that I do is I go to the like success group meetings, which I know sounds very like I go to the thing, I'm in the but like it is very helpful, I've found, especially because there are people there who are both more and less familiar than me with like the skills that we teach. And it's always great to kind of get out of your own head when it comes to setting a goal and problem solving for it, because other people have experienced meeting and not meeting their goals. So they have like almost kind of like hacks. Like I one time was at like the student success group and I was like, well, I like studying with other people, but like I get really distracted by it. And someone was like, oh, have you ever like put on a TV show in the background? Like I always work with a TV show in the background. And I was like, I hate working with a TV show in the background. But I bet if I listened to conversation like in another language, that would give me that sense of like, okay, like there's a little bit of people around. Like if I pull up like the Club Penguin bot, like I'm probably going to get clocked, but I'm not getting drawn into the conversation. So like even if someone doesn't have the exact thing that will help you, hearing different ideas is enough to kind of get you out of your like, to meet this goal, I will choose to do it and then it will happen. Like, bro, not all the time.
Wow, you just shared so many good things, and I really hope that any students listening to this consider all of the suggestions, because talking to a supervisor, your professor, talking to family friend, and communicating, this is what I need from you.
Yeah. And I think the biggest thing also is people, and I'm speaking like from personal experience, it is very vulnerable at first to sort of bring someone else in on your own like goal setting process. And it can feel almost like a little bit infantilizing of like, oh man, I need to like talk out with someone how to like get myself to brush my teeth more. I can't believe I just admitted that on a podcast. It's so much better than it used to be. But they really see it as like professional, because it is like something that's very professional to kind of like compartmentalize what you want to do outside of like, well, I really want it to happen and so it'll happen. Being like, I want to brainstorm this, like I want to make a game plan. Like there's a difference in how I talk to my professors about goal setting versus how I talk to like my partner or my peers. And I think just giving yourself the credit of like, I know how to present myself so that people don't look down on me for needing to talk this out to make it happen, because for the majority of the time, people have been like, oh, you're putting a lot of effort into this, and I really respect someone who's willing to put effort into things.
Yeah. And unfortunately, this is all of our time, but I think that was a great ending point to say effort really matters. And when you're setting those goals, thinking about how you can incorporate how much you're willing to put into each goal.
Mm-hmm.
So thank you so much for sharing your experience with goal setting. It was great to have you here.
Thank you so much for having me here. Yeah, this was awesome. I hope that everybody listening listens to the other episodes and stops by the weekly meetings, because it's fun. And we would love for more people to come.
Yes, and I also quickly would like to share that we do one-on-one success coaching meetings as well. They are a half hour, so if you're interested in signing up, you can definitely head over to Be Successful or Starfish and schedule a one-on-one as well, but we would love to have you at the groups.